when I mention Lindow Man? What do we mean by Lindow Man? Andy, who is he?
Found in a bog. I think it was originally thought to be a murder victim, wasn't he, Lindow Man? And then they discovered that he was actually a Bronze Age body that had been, what do you call it, preserved in the peat bog.
Right, well, I'm going to re-educate you, Andy. Lindow Man was the second of 4 bodies found.
Right.
Lindow Woman, that was found in 1983, was believed to be the murder victim.
Oh,
and
right.
These date from the Iron Age, but you know,
Oh, yeah.
you got a few things right, but that was a good stab. Talking about stab in the dark, what about you, Margaret?
What about me?
This is about bogs and marsh. You know, it's your area.
Yeah, Lindow it's in Cheshire, isn't it?
Yes, it is in your area, exactly.
Yeah, 2,000-year-old body found in a bog, and apparently when bodies are found in bogs, they've been preserved. It goes like preserving something in vinegar.
Right, stop at that point, because we're going to be doing these now. And what's his name? Roger and John, anything you want to say?
No.
And Peter?
Well, just the bogs are ericaceous and things would be would last for a long time.
Describe what the word ericaceous means.
Acidic.
Bingo. Now, these are all really good points, right? So what we're going to do, we've got a lot of text, which I'm going to be reading out. I'm going to be cutting some of your... I'll see if I can cut some of your mics. So Andy's is already done. So I want you to stay with me, Roger. That's okay. So I've just got Roger with us now. So Roger's my little sentinel. So we've been doing this on Zoom, where I have somebody staying with me. So Roger, what we're going to do, we're going to screen share now, and you can tell me, are we screen sharing? What are we screen sharing? We should be screen sharing a map now. Have we got a map on the board?
Yes.
Okay. It's a rather strange map. A map of famous personalities from around Britain, including Thora Hird. So there's Lindow Man.
Yep.
And it's sort of northern Cheshire. So this sort of paints the scene, so we know where we're going, and there it is. So these little round blobs on the screen are indicating where some bog bodies are found in Europe. In fact, there's hundreds of bog bodies being found across Europe, and quite a few found across Britain over many generations. I think the first bog bodies were being reported in the 1600s, actually. But Lindow Man is the one, Lindow Woman, and the other two after that are the ones that we're going to go to today. So obviously, I want to impart a lot of information today. So we'll see where we're going to go. And there he is, a reconstruction of Lindow Man. Now, whatever you want to say about Lindow Man, Lindow Man's body was treated like a god in comparison with the human remains found at St. Bees in 1981. Now, interestingly enough, this individual's remains weren't found a decade after. In the case of Otzi the Iceman, these remains were found 3 years after the St. Bees body was found, using preservation techniques that mean that you can still see Lindow Man today. Okay? So going back to St. Bees, why they treated St. Bees in such an abysmal way, I don't know. Just a quick mention. I know I'm digressed completely. There's this chap who watched my video on St. Bees on the internet, and he's a bit of an expert actually. And he actually reports that there is a number of bodies of knights being found in Britain that have been found in such a perfect state of preservation, and none of them have remained in a preserved state today. I'll just leave you that. No more discussion. So just an idea of what the individual body, where the body come from. This is Lindow Moss, and I can't make up some of the names of the people and the circumstances in connection with the bodies at Lindow Moss, for example.
KARL, I think.
So I'll go on, Rog.
One body was found with a rope around its neck. I don't know which one that was.
That's number 2.
I don't know if the others had anything like that, signs of execution or murder.
Oh yeah, the other remains of Lindow 4, I think it was. We found the remains of a buttocks that seemed to have been, you know, ritualistically wounded. So put it that way. What I'm going to say quickly, right? Let's just chuck out the other things. It used to be thought by the Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's 1st of July 1935 inception in the Ahnenerbe, which went around Europe and the world trying to find evidence of the pure Aryan race. Heinrich Himmler believed that that the bog bodies across Europe were signs that homosexuality was frowned upon in the past, and that bog bodies in Europe are indications of homosexuals being garroted and killed in the Iron Age, right? Chuck a couple of that in there, chuck a couple of the nonsense in there. It's not exactly true, because lots of bog bodies are females. And lots of them have been garroted. Lots of them have got piercing wounds on them. Lots of them have been poisoned, various other bits and pieces. But you can't always tell whether the wounds were applied to the body before death or after death, you know, post-mortem. So, you know, you've got to have an open mind with this chapter today. We don't start off really going into the full nitty-gritty of just the bodies at Lindow Moss, because it's such a strange journey, to be honest with you, today. But anyway, let's look at some more images. This is a group of archaeologists, Cheshire, taking the body out of Lindow Moss in 1984. This is body 2, Andy, not body 1. But Andy, you're right. I dismissed something that you said. You could always presume that all these bog bodies are murder victims. It's murder victims in a previous, you know, little bit before today, in other words. So I shouldn't have really dismissed what you said. But the original body found in 1983 before Lindow Man was Lindow Woman. Another little story about that. There he is. Now, we actually test this lecture out on a live audience on a Monday still. But we actually did it today. And when I'm making descriptions of this without the image, note that you've got the head, you've got the tan skin. Nice one, Margaret. You've got the humerus, and you've got the radius, and you've got the ulna, which you got skin on it. And on this side, you've got the hand, right? So on the right-hand side, you've got the hand. On the left-hand side, we've got evidence of the fingers still. Now, it's not the way we shouldn't blame the archaeologists in the way they treated the body. We should blame the people who found the body initially in the way they treated it. But the body was treated with quite reverence after that. Now, one of the questions that I was hit today with, I mean, it took us half an hour to try and get an answer, was that why, in most cases, do the bones associated with these bodies disintegrate completely? Well, in this instance, the ulna and the radius on the right hand is in a skeletal form, while the rest of the bones underneath that leathery skin has completely dissolved. Now, we've got some answers to that, but we don't have an answer to one key thing. And if anyone's got a suggestion, bang it to me in the break, right? We looked at lots of sources, books, internet stuff today to try and work out why the skull doesn't go into, doesn't disappear, but the rest of the skeletal remains do disappear, and all you're left with is the organs and the skin, right? Sorry, I'm not giving you enough information there, but that's live. And there, I got to be honest with you, right? This is a case of St. Bees. However, they were a little bit more scientific in understanding the body in 1984 than when they were in 1981. So we got St. Bees, badly treated. 1984, the body at Lindow Moss, very well treated. But they're lacking masks. They do have rubber gloves on. And I got to be honest with that woman. I wish I could erase her from the image because she's going, "Oh, how terrible! What a terrible thing I'm looking at." Well, I don't need to really see that, do we, Roger? It's a bit childish, to be honest with you. Because I've seen this body in the British Museum. I saw this body in the British Museum, let me say, in 1987, I think it was. So I don't have as many images tonight, but I don't really need them because I want to tell a story more than anything, rather than last week's lecture that we had a lot going on, right? So let's just there was a lot going on last week, Rod.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do now, I've got all these images up the top there. Shut up. I've got all these images at the top there, and I wanted to we've got the Wikipedia entry is pretty good, but I've got another source I want to look at there. But let's look at this one here. Bless this boggy brook. So to try and understand what bog bodies are about, I looked at a few sources, right? Ignore that top bit there, because that's not really helping us. European peat bogs happen to be excellent at preserving organic matter. Bits of animal skin, like the vellum pages upon which the ancient Psalter was written, can last for hundreds or thousands of years when they get trapped under the surface of peat, at the top of a peat bog. That's because they're exposed to an acidic environment with lots of Magnum Moss and very little oxygen. Magnum Moss is really important. Now, the Magnum Moss is important to the body. This Magnum Moss is a living organism within the mossy landscape, and that creates a layer on the top of the rotting moss and the other rotting, decaying matter underneath this. Mention bog oak, wonderful thing. Mention my visit with Michelle, hand in hand, to the Shetland National Museum, where we actually saw not only bog oak, we actually saw bog butter, which is perfectly preserved in bogs, alongside bog bodies. So one point I mentioned to somebody on the internet today was that whiskey, we've moved on. Whiskey is the end result. As Magnum Moss rotting down, as Magnum Moss rots down, it draws calcium and various other minerals from the conditions of the landscape and forms that into a liquid, creating the liquids that are the perfect ingredients for creating whiskey. So I know Peter's a bit partial to his whiskey. So whenever you're drinking whiskey, bring a toast to the people's putrefying liquids that you're drinking, Peter, with a big smile on his face. So these factors make life very hard for microbes that would otherwise cause rotting and decomposition. So the Magnum Moss, the activities of everything is doing what the oxygen is doing in a different way. Magnum Moss produces an antibiotic substance called smagnon that staves off rot in several ways. First, it binds with proteins on the surface of microorganisms in a way that immobilizes them and removes them from the water. Second, it's a highly reactive carbonyl group, can alter the chemicals and nutrients that would be considered for the decomposition of a piece of organic matter. So what we're talking about is that it's loving calcium, it's loving the bones. So that's the second bit there. Third, the Magnum Moss causes the organic matter to undergo certain chemical changes that make it more impervious to rot in much the same way that animal skins can be preserved as leather. So what we're talking about, this Magnum Moss preserves organics that are not the organics associated with bone and calcium. So that's what we're talking about. So moving on to the next bit, the peculiar repositories of bogs are invaluable when we understand archaeology. More than 1,000 specimens of well-preserved human remains have been found under beds of peat moss. These bog bodies can retain their key features for thousands of years. In many cases, the chemicals in the bog break down the skeleton, the skeletal remains, the bone itself, everything, and leave only the soft tissue. The tannin reactions from the Magnum Moss give the skin on these remains the characteristic dark brown colour. You've got Cologne Man there, which is mentioned in Denmark, estimated going back over 2,300 years. And then we go to Lindow Man, and we think about the throat, strangulation, and the tossing him into the bog. So we've mentioned that there. Now we're armed with a bit of information. Information is power. Let's go through the list. Now, are we still looking at text and stuff on the screen? My wonderful Roger. Yeah?
Yeah.
I wish he would open his bloody gob and stop stuffing it with chocolate. So, a bog. Now, lots of these bogs are a fraction of the size of where they used to be. Starcar is one example. So what we do, we've got a bit of a list here. I want to put our Lindow Man and Lindow Woman and everyone else into some kind of landscape of bog bodies. So this is a wonderful list. So we're going to share this on the screen. Dredged out, and what I'm going to do, let's have a bit more enlargement. Bit more there, bit more there. Ooh, it's enlarging. There's nothing wrong with a bit of enlargement. No, chitter me not. Dredged out of the past and hinting at violent mysteries, bog bodies intrigue and haunt us. Why? Because we're always so anally interested in people finding their way into bogs, being murdered, debauched, and so on. They could actually be accidental victims, or they could actually be people who found themselves at the epicenter of something else. People may have already died, so they decided to give them a ritualistic death. There's loads of different interpretations. Like everything in archaeology, don't us forget that. Bogs are cold weather swamps. So let's not look minus. Let's look at 4 degrees C, no more than 10 degrees C. Bogs are perfect. Those bogs in Glastonbury are no longer the bogs that are able to preserve organic matter that we can really understand the past. They were perfect 120 years ago when we look at Glastonbury and we look at all those types of landscapes. But the oxygen-free environment prevents decay, and the excessive tannins, naturally occurring chemicals used in tanning a leather. So what we're talking about, it's a natural tanning pit. And the wonderful thing is, this is the thing. We might be able to find penises surviving, but we can find a rib bone surviving. Do you know what I mean? We can survive. We can understand the dietary tract. We can research the dietary tract, but we can't find rib bones. We can't find a humerus. You know, it's really interesting. But why were they there, and why did so many die violently? But not all. That's sort of a nice conclusion there. This is Yeti Girl. There she is. Apparently she had beautiful red hair. Yeti Girl is a wonderful example. You can do your own research on this, okay? She was found in 1897, believed to have been about 16 years old. Died probably, let's give a date there. Forget those BCs and ADs. around 2,000 years ago. Probably not in the Roman landscape, because the Netherlands was part of the Roman landscape at least by around 100 years AD. So here we go. Strangulation and ritualistic murder, strangely enough, were outlawed in the Roman Empire. So this must have occurred just before the Romans took over the Netherlands, right? So manner of her death: strangulation. A woolen band remains around her throat. She was also stabbed with a knife near her left clavicle. So it's a bit of a stabbing there. However, like some of us today, like me, she suffered from scoliosis and probably had an irregular gait. She was buried in a large woolen cloak. Now, that's all we're going to say about her. We're not doing her tonight, but a bit more background. The Wordingle couple, the Wordingle man, or the Wordy Girdle man. Again, dating from around the birth of Christ. We don't have, because we don't have much to go by, we don't have much to understand in the sense of radiocarbon dating. We've got to go for what we understand from what we can understand. So we got about 2,000 years ago again on this one. So there's two individuals, a smaller man and a larger man. This is evidence that the Ahnenerbe cited for homosexuals being killed in the Iron Age. So we're talking about the Iron Age in Europe, the later Iron Age in Europe. So a larger man whose arm lies under the body of a smaller man. It was believed back in the day that these two were man and woman, but by the time they were by the time they were understood and reinterpreted by the Ahnenerbe, they were understood to be two men that had been murdered because they were homosexuals. But we don't think that is true anymore. So they're both men, nothing to do with being gay. There's no evidence to them being gay. But the larger of the figure had a wound to their chest, and further on down, the intestines had been seemingly poured out of the body. Ritualistic, or was it that? To be honest with you, I'm not going to say ritual. I'm going to say somebody has died, right? Two people have died. We don't know if they died at the same time. That's a key issue, right? We don't know if they died at the same time. Stabbing someone in the guts, allowing their intestines to pour out after death, doesn't mean to say that's a ritualistic death. It's an after death, of a post-mortem death. Lots of indications. I want us to be more open. 1938, another body was found. This was found in Denmark, dating to in the Iron Age, not after the birth of Christ like the other two. This person was seen to be buried with a rope made of skin, found with the body, and there are visible furrows around the neck. And this is a woman. This is a girl again, another girl, not a man. Her finely braided pigtail and her cloak. She probably aged for about 25 years old. Sewn with fine thread, a piece of her cloak was wrapped around her feet. Although she was found 12 years earlier, her body was located at a very close distance, no more than 100 meters away from Tolland Man, which we'll come on to. The Cologne Big Man, found in 1941, again around 25 years old, dating. This is an astronomical date, dating to maybe 10,000 years ago. I've got to think that the date's got to be wrong there. It's got to be wrong. But if it's not, this body is 10,000 years old, and the oldest bog body that we know of anywhere in Europe, 10,000 years old again. He was thought to be a woman until now we know it was a man. Only a skull and several bones were found, but no signs of violence were present. That changes the mix. So that does change the mix. And, we know from the bodies at Callahan on South Uist in Hebridean Islands, we know that those bodies were probably people that died, were mummified, and somehow put in a bog. Unlike these, they were brought out of the ground and sort of they had another fate. But, you know, Tolland Man, look at that head there. Oh, look at that head. Look into those eyes.
That's the one with the rope around his neck, isn't it?
Yeah, this is another one, Tolland Man. Look at that. I'm going to just take that in. The wrinkles. Here we go. Found in 1950, up to about 40 years old. Again, dating to maybe a mean average about 150 years BC, before the birth of Christ, in Tolland, relatively close to that woman found. Hanging, Roger. Death caused by suffocation, not by the combination of suffocation and a broken neck. So he was, he has the most well-preserved body of all bog bodies to date. Only his arms and hands are like in a skeletal form. Either his clothing disintegrated or he was buried wearing only a pointed cap made of sheepskin and an oxide belt. So again, there we go. We know he was hung. And you've got evidence there. And again, all the bodies point to various different practices associated with these individuals. Why archaeologists are obsessed with murder and all these different things, I don't know. This is an interesting individual. Again, oh, hang on a minute. Hang on, I've just lost this a minute. We're going back. There we go. Again, year found 1952. This body is found in Denmark, 1952, after the war. And again, looking again, red hair, tan skin, probably, obviously much lighter, throat slit from ear to ear. His hands and feet are very well preserved, as is his face. He remains one of the most examined bog bodies and is believed to have been sacrificed to a fertility god after a bad harvest. How the bloody hell I know these things, I don't know. We're going to do Lindow Man, so we're not going to spend too much because we're going to do this anyway. So we got radiocarbon dating before or around or after the birth of Christ. Maybe the body was laid into the ground just before the Romans got to the Cheshire area. Maybe by around 50 years AD. And they originally, right, so obviously they examined the teeth to find any fillings. Because previously, the previous year, they'd found a woman's body or a head that was linked to a murder case from 1961. Then they thought that, you know, maybe this could be linked to another murder. But the actual body that was thought to be from a murder was a Lindow woman. Okay. Evidence the person was well groomed, hair, beard, trimmed by shear and fingernail filed from what we find from the fingers. And a Lindow man wore a fox fur band on his left arm, but was otherwise naked. Nothing wrong with a lot of frontal nudity, is there, Margaret? Old Croggan Man. So we've got this piece from 2003, more precise dating from around 200 years BC from Ireland. Strangulation, stabbing, and I had holes cut in his arms through which threads of twisted hazel were threaded. Rather strange, though. Decapitated upper torso only. Right, okay. His fingernails seem to be manicured. Wore leather armbands, a bronze amulet. And this is rather interesting. Now, there's two of them found. The next one, Croggan Man and Clon Cavil Man had their nipples off, and that sucking a king's nipples was a gesture of submission in ancient Ireland. This is what I found with Michelle. Oh, what have I just said, Roger? The brutal removal of their nipples, therefore, may be an indication that the two were either failed kings or failed candidates for kingship. So as Michelle's my queen, when she's no longer my queen, I've got to cut her nipples off and start suckling someone else's. That's what we're saying there, isn't it, Roger?
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. I like that bit about the sucking nipples. So in other words, in Ireland, you've got to suckle a king's nipples because he's the ruler. If you have the nipples cut off, you're no longer classed as a king. Oh, God, I just finding this hard. You've got Cloncavel Man, and there he is. Another redhead. They didn't seem to like their redheads back in the past. Again, the hair looks well kept. And I can't, obviously the nipples are there. And obviously they've obviously been cut off somewhere along the line. But here we go. Year found 2003. Again, more around, probably maybe before the other one. He was strangled, stabbed, struck on the head 3 times and on the chest once with an axe and disemboweled. Oh my God, what a fate! The legs and lower arms are missing. It's thought that he used product, plant oil and pine resin on his hair. So he's well manicured. He had a he was triply killed. So if you all write this one down, when you're triply killed, let's write this one down. It's when you're triply killed, you're killed in a way to represent fertility, sovereignty, and war and death. So in other words, if you want to take that, so you're killed. So fertility is when you're strangled, stabbed, and then finally struck. How that all works out, I don't know.
No.
But and what we've got here before we go on to our Lindo. Before we go on to our Lindo, would you mind, people, if I get a quick drink? So I want us to do this little bit, and then we'll do Lindo Woman, or maybe I should do Lindo Woman first. Yeah, I think I should do Lindo Woman first, and then we'll go to this little bit here. But you can read this a little bit of this, but we're gonna cut the screen share and we're gonna go to Lindo. So I'm gonna go and get a drink a minute. Hang on.
Right.
He says that all the skin was tanned. I believe is tanned in the same way that leather is tanned by barking. And so the acidic material found it would actually bark the skin and give it that colour. Same way we barked nets to preserve them in the past.
What were you saying, Pete? The meat?
That the tanning of the skin was the barking of the material in which it was found, the acidic material. Same as we bark leather, we tan leather, and we bark nets, and we use a bark solution to preserve things like the bark from the oak trees, etc. And that's made into a tanning material. Leather.
Can I add to that, Peter, please, if I may? When I was at St. Fagans, it was quite a strange thing. When I was at St. Fagans, it was about 5 years ago. They had a woman in a house, and she said, does anyone get squeamish or feel sick quick? And I thought, no. So she said, right, I'm holding the brains of, I think it was a shrew. And she said, I'm holding the brains of a shrew, right? And I'm just going to I'm going to mush this up in my hand. So she mushed the brain up in her hand, and we were all looking in horror. And she said, "This brain is now going to be used to put the oils into the skin to act as a preservative for skin." And I said, "Well, what skin are you going to use?" And she said, "The skin of the shrew, because the oils in the brain." In the preservation and the processes, and obviously we're looking at tanning and all the rest of it. Your brain is enough to put oils into the skin to preserve it. And it was quite a strange day, that one. I've never seen that done since, Peter.
No, and see, those bodies were pickled.
Yeah, basically.
How do you preserve onions?
Yeah,
put them in an acid solution. How do you pickle anything? Put it in an acid solution. They're in an acid solution.
Do you know, Peter, never keep cider vinegar in a jar with a metal top. Because my mum had really strong cider vinegar, and she had a nice glass jar with one of those craft tops, you know, the clip ones.
Yeah.
And she had this cider vinegar in there a couple of years. She clipped the top, and the whole top fell in. It completely rotted it. That's how powerful it is. But it's rather interesting. It's rather interesting that we're talking about. What's that, Pete? Rog?
Cleans off pennies.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, actually, we've gone off on a tangent now, thanks to Pete. When there used to be this little joke. I think Bill Lines told me this when he was in Tunisia. He said that he was offered a coin, a Roman coin, from a peddler on the street while he was serving back from Burma. And he was an aircraft fitter, and he said he was offered this coin, and he said, "How many times has that been through the goat?" Because apparently, when you put a coin through a goat with the acids in the goat's stomach, it dates the coin 200 years. So you ask a peddler how many times it's been through a goat.
Goodness.
So what we're going to do? We're going to do Lindow Woman. And after the break, we'll do Lindow Man. So we're not seeing anything on the screen, are we, Roger?
Nope.
Are you just seeing me?
And the others.
Oh, all the others. Do you know what? It's good to have a bit of Totty with us. You know, it wouldn't be the same.
And John with a scene on the outside street or something.
Cool. Yeah, John will change it after the break to a castle or something. John, after the break, can you get an image of Lindow Man in the background? But don't do it yet. We'll do that after the break. So Lindow Woman. So Lindow Woman. She later became known as Lindow 1. A Lindow Man became known as Lindow 2. And then you got Lindow 3 and Lindow 4. And Linda 5, but that's another story altogether. These are associated with Magnum Moss in Wilmslow, Cheshire. You'll all know Wilmslow. The body was found on the 13th of May, 1983. Interestingly enough, by commercial peat cutters. And we're going to digress. We're going to digress again. Years ago, I was working next door to a garden centre. And this woman said, "Oh, come and have a look at this." So I had a look at this. She said, "In the peat, we've got a bit of iron." And I said, "You know what that is, don't you?" And I said, "Oh," she said, "It's obviously an arrowhead." And I said, "That's bog iron, that is." Because what happens, all the sesqui oxides, all the iron oxides gather together in the bog, and they create a form of iron known as bog iron. So there you go. Anyway, the remains were largely a skull fragment found at Lindow, which was missing its jaw, but with soft tissue and hair attached. Nice. But immediately they thought that this had been a murder victim's head. Eventually it was later identified to be from the Roman period. But interesting enough, what they did, they found a cold case from 1961. What happened in 1961? There was a Malika de Fernandez. She disappeared. And I need to give you some background. She had married a Peter Rindbrandt, and they live locally. They live very close to Lindow Moss. And not long after they got married, Malika went on holiday. She went off with a bloke, and she got back and she found her husband Peter in bed with another man. And this is 1961. And she said, right, you're having an affair, I'm having an affair. If you don't give me a reasonable payout from the divorce, but this is obviously coming from Peter, we don't know how much of this is true, right? If you don't give me a reasonable payout from the divorce, I'm going to tell everybody that you're sleeping with a man. So naturally, what do, Roger? You bump her off. You know? But obviously, Roger, I know me and you have never been involved in any homosexual impropriety, but I know Peter has with Chris, who goes on our trips. But that's something else. But anyway, so what we're looking at here is that this guy murdered Malika. And the police said, look, there's a cold case. We found a head of a woman. He said, it was me. I did it. So he confessed to a murder. He confessed to the murder after 22 years, right? And the police thought, wicked. We've solved the murder. This is great. But they were quite perturbed by the fact that the body didn't really fit the profile of this woman. But they thought, right, your typical police back in 1983, you know, not long after the Sweeney and all the rest of it. We've got a body, we've got a confession. That's it. It's done, right? But the weird thing was that they couldn't let it rest. You know, they got the head examined. Oh, there's another thing there. They got the head examined, and it turned out to be somebody dating back a long time ago. But that's the introduction, actually. The bog body at Lindow was discovered by peat cutters Andy Mould, can't make it up, and Stephen McDooley. They first noticed an unusual item on the conveyor belt, which was similar in shape and size to a football. They took the object from the conveyor to examine it more closely. And there's talk they kicked it, but that's something else. After they removed the adhesive remains of peat, they realized they had found the incomplete preserved human head with attached remnants of soft tissue, brain, eye. There was a bit of an eye there, a bit of an optical nerve, and hair. So you can imagine this. Could you imagine if that was found today? They would have had a selfie made with it. You can see it now, can't you? It's quite gruesome. Anyway, the police were summoned to deal with the remains and suspected a crime. They launched a murder investigation, and the 57-year-old Peter confessed straight away. When questioned, Peter Rindbrandt assumed that the skull fragment came from his wife's body, saying, "It had been so long, I thought I would never be found out." Afterward, he made a full confession about how he had killed Fernandez in June 1961. She had returned home, and obviously there was the affair. Found that he was sharing the premises with another man, and in return for not revealing his homosexuality, still a criminal offence back then. Rindbrandt subsequently dismembered his wife's body and discarded the bits of the body in the bog. And he was found guilty at Chester Crown Court in December 1983. End of the case. But I think the next bit of the story is really interesting. There was a savvy detective back then, very savvy, a detective, Inspector George Abbott. And I don't think this would happen today because, and I've got some personal experience of this, because when a load of bones were found on the beach at Monk Nash, the police kept them in a bag on his desk, and eventually handed them over to Archaeology Cymru. And no care was taken with those bones at all, except by us. So it's strange that they went through all the efforts, and I'm glad the police officer went through the efforts, because they had the skull radiocarbon dated, and it dated back to roughly around 250 years AD, suggesting that the body related to the Roman period. After this was revealed, obviously, Peter Reinhard Brandt tried to revoke his confession, but because he had admitted to the murder in the first place, he went on trial, and he was they found him guilty. They found him guilty, even though they hadn't actually found the actual remains of her, and they've never found the remains of his wife even to this day. But strangely enough, the date range of this woman is also the same date range as the guy's wife. And they found other sets of human remains. Now I want to do this last little bit, and then we're gonna have a break. I am actually a bit exhausted, actually, and I'm gonna see if I can get my new mic on, so that'll be interesting. But John, you've got to do your little bit of homework and put that on in the background. The preservation of bog bodies is dependent on a set of specific chemical conditions which can occur in peat bogs. A sphagnum moss bog must have a temperature lower than 4 degrees C. We've already said that. And the subsequent annual temperature must not rise more than 10 degrees C. Moisture in a bog must remain stable, and a bog must not dry out. So this is one of the things bogs in the Somerset levels drying out, causing the archaeology to fade away. And we're also talking about the same type of thing at Star Car as well. A few interesting chemical things for peat. I know you'll be interested in this. The acid content needs to have a pH of no more than 4.5 and no less than 4.3. Any less, you're starting to get into a neutral pH and into alkaline conditions, which is no good for anybody. If that was the case, right? If it was under about, if it was well under that, you're looking at if you're well under that, you're looking at the possibility of alkaline conditions, and it would just be all stagnant. It would be quite awful and smelly, and nothing would be preserved there. The concentration
7 is neutral, Carl. Anything higher is alkaline. Anything below 7 is acidic.
Peter, I was actually realizing that when I said it. So 1 is really acidic. Yeah, 1 is really I realized that when I was saying it. I do apologize. 1 is
the hydrogen ion. Yeah.
One is really acidic, and obviously 10, 11 is going to be really alkaline. Yeah, I admit I got that wrong, and I realized that when I was saying it. When you haven't done your school stuff in ages, and I suddenly saw the table in front of me. I thought, oh no, what a mistake. Thanks for that, Pete.
Yo.
The concentration of dissolved minerals also tend to be low. Dying moss forms layers of sediment that we've already said, stopping oxygen from getting into the anaerobic conditions, breaking things down. The acid has its own way, and everything starts to break down. There's chemical reactions, and we'll look at that after the break. I know, Roger, you said yo. So let's do the yo bit.
Let's have the tea, boy.
What's that, Rog?
Get the kettle on.
I tell you what, right? I will. I've got to do my mic now. So any break? Anyone got to say anything? No.
No.
You've got permission to change my Can I just have a conversation with John? John, I need you to drag me into this. So, John, put your mic on. John, mic, please.
On.
Right. Okay, John, right. Did you, first question. Well, you could talk amongst yourselves. I'm having a conversation with John a minute, so shut up, everybody. Right. So, right, John, I want to know, did you start off this call today?
No.
Right, so it's not the fact that you're the master. So I'm the same level of you in this Skype call. So I need to know how to do this.
Carl, I think it'll be his camera. Because I can't do it, and I've got the latest version of Skype on mine, and I can't do it on mine.
Have you got a portable camera, John?
Yes.
It's got to be his camera then.
I think it'll be in the camera settings, because mine won't do it.
Right, but mind you, I can do it on Zoom, Andy.
Yeah, but that may be in the Zoom software. It's possible because you've got the software for the camera and the software for the whatever conferencing software you're using. That may well be in the Zoom capabilities, and it may well, because I can't. Mine won't do it, and I've just checked. I've got the latest update, and I went on the help screen, and it doesn't say I do anything either.
John, are you actually paying for Skype?
No.
You're not.
So,
Right,
John,
so,
do you know if it's in your Skype settings or in your camera settings that you've been able to change the background?
I don't know. When I put this next picture up, Lindow Man, I'll study it in more depth.
Right, so can you do it now for the sake of argument, John?
Oh, I'm just doing Lindow Man.
All right, you look for Lindow Man, and I'm going to go into my settings. You tell me when you've sorted her out.
All right, okay.
I've got appearance. I go into appearance. I've got color. I've got enable compact list. No. I got enable split view mode. No. Use systems. No. Can't get it there. It's not in settings, Andy. So if I go back to that, hang on. If I go back, hang on. There is something else I'm not using. Hang on. Right, so there's all the settings. What is that there? Right, I've taken a snapshot, which I don't want.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do the week, and it got sent to you.
All
Yeah,
right,
I've got a snapshot.
I've got that. Right, so now the only thing it's got, stop recording. We're not doing that. Turn subtitles on. Unblur my background. No.
Yeah, that's all the ones I've got, you see.
Turn off incoming video. Hold call audio and video settings. I'll just look on that. Now, if I change the Toshiba, no, not the Toshiba camera. It's his camera. It's got to be his camera.
That's what made me think, because there is no other options, is there? So.
What laptop model have you got? Is it a Toshiba?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm on a PC, on a desktop PC. It's a custom built one. So.
I think I'm being discriminated against.
Yeah, because you're racist.
No, I still can't see anybody.
Oh, really?
I can see the images when they come up, and when somebody talks, I can just see that person. But right now, I can just see the little icons, the little images.
Oh, that's interesting.
By the way, looking at this, I'm just about to add that image of Lindow Man. It's audio and visual settings, and yes, it's HP webcam HD 2300. So yeah, it's probably not in Spike.
Can you just stop that a minute? What was before you said that sentence? What did you two go where again?
All right, hang on. Right, if I click on my image, right hand click it.
Yeah.
Choose background effect.
No, we haven't got that.
And it comes up audio and video settings, and the camera is HP webcam HD 2300. So yes, you're right. It must be something to do with the camera rather than Skype.
Well, I'm going to try something else. No, it is your camera.
Yeah, we want one. I'm gonna find this
Oh, I
camera.
can see.
I can see. Right. Okay. I can have a
You can
break.
see clearly now, can you, Margaret?
I can
see Carl
clearly.
now.
Oh, never mind. He's going now.
There you are. There's
can
Lindow
see us,
Man.
Margaret.
Combing his hair. Looks like a sheepdog.
Yeah.
Do you know, Margaret, whether you've got the latest version of Skype on yours?
I very much doubt it.
Yeah, that may be the issue. That may be that it's not the latest version, and that's why it's struggling. Because unless they're compatible ones, that was always Skype's problem. We had this. One of the reasons we went off Skype all those ages ago.
Yeah.
Was because it updated and we couldn't get it to work right. So, and then it settled down again.
I can see Pete. Pete's in his little bubble and Carl's in his bubble.
Yeah.
Animated.
Got Pete and myself up there.
You are just, it's just you as Jesus Christ. And John stood there like a parrot.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I've got John. I've got all I can see is his background, which is what's his name? Lindow Man.
Yeah, but you can see me okay.
Yeah, I can see you perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame. Poor you.
I can still see you haven't got your tooth's missing. Yeah.
I'm not going to have my tooth until August.
Right. Keep it as a reminder. Keep the gap and say this is the process. This is for all the dead people from.
Doesn't really matter right now, does it?
No one can see you
Yeah.
unless you go on Skype. Yeah.
That exactly. It adds character, doesn't it?
Didn't John last week that John added all those effects on as well? The filters with his funny ears and noses and things. Didn't he do that last week as well? Must be his camera.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't do the back. I wondered if you could do backgrounds, but I might try another camera and see if I can do it with that later on.
Yes, thank you. I'm organised.
But then you wouldn't need your green background, Carl, if you could just change the background anyway. It's not a very good chroma key, I have to say, on John. But
He looks as if he's in Wicked.
yes.
Are you still within hearing distance, Carl? No.
I think he's switched off. He's concentrating on something profound and green.
Mm.
Oh, I know what might improve Lindow Man. Let there be light.
Very good.
Mm.
We had a big funeral in the village today, and it was quite moving because everybody came out onto the streets and lined the streets as it went past.
What's that then?
Sorry?
What was that?
I said we had quite a big funeral in the village.
Oh, right.
I don't think he died from coronavirus. He'd been ill before it came out, but he was a very light guy.
Oh. Was he on the coast there or something?
Yeah, he had been in the Coast Guard as well, but he was always in anything in the village. He was always involved in helping out, and he was always dead cheerful. And always had a joke with me about something. He always saw the funny side of things.
Right.
He'd be in his 80s, I would think now, but he's not been well for a bit. But it was nice to see so many people out on the street because there's been quite a few going on, obviously with the virus, and there's just nobody there because you can't go.
Right. No, I know. Very difficult. So, who have we got? Up behind you now, John.
Lindow Man.
Lindow Man, is it? Oh.
Mm.
He's looking at you.
Like PJ Proby or something.
It's the picture that Carl put up at right at the beginning.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Can't see much of the mouth in that. So.
Well, it works quite well, John. Well done.
Mm. If you can hear me, Carl, I put an egg out and some fresh Sainsbury's beef cubes out for Mr. Corvid. I put it on the floor to start with, but a blinking cat found it, which I had to chase off. So I moved it to a higher position. I don't think you're hearing me, are you? Playing with your new mic. Mr. Corvid is a magpie I've got with no tail. But, I mean, he's not sort of in the house or anything, he's outside, but Carl seems to think he's been bullied by other corvids, and that's why he ain't got any tail. He seems to think that eventually they'll kill it unless I sort of feed it up and get its tail growing again. So I've bought some beef and chucked an egg out there because I know magpies eat eggs, and see if that sort of does any good.
Right.
Give it some chocolate.
Well, yeah.
Sounds like somebody got crisps.
It's a time out, I think, I'm eating at the moment.
Very good. Nice. How about my Twix?
I had my tea before we started.
Good boy.
I didn't. I got too much to blinking do. That's the trouble. Anyway.
I thought you retired. Are you retired?
Well, that's it. That's why. I got too much to do.
Yeah. You can't go out.
Well,
Yeah.
I've still got 2 mink floats to go and look at and see if they're all right. Plus me magpie. I get very jealous of, really, of Carl and his crows. I think I'd love to walk around with a crow on my shoulder. But I don't know. It's the mess that they might make that puts me off. But
Oh, that's the thing. They will, won't they?
well, of course they will.
Yeah.
I've never heard of an house-trained crow.
Got a nappy for him, be all right?
Well, or an house-trained magpie for that matter. But they're very, very clever birds, without a doubt. I mean, I sit and watch them, and it's amazing what they can work out.
Oh, yeah, very clever. Yes, cunning. Right.
That's strange. I've got a big full screen picture of Pete now.
Oh.
I don't know. I think you as Andrew said, I think you need to get the latest Skype version. But the thing is, when you switch it on, it should prompt you to go to the latest version. So I don't know.
What Tony
Don't have to
thinks
wonder to
it
ask for an update. Yeah.
Tony thinks has been updated, but I keep getting, you see, Pete's gone now. He's just in his little bubble at the top.
Well, I ain't got no, we're all in squares here.
No, I can't see anybody.
Except for Andy. Andy's in a bubble.
Andy's in a bubble. Carl disappeared.
There was a setting that changed it from who was talking.
Let me have a look in settings. Let's see if there's anything.
I can't remember. I saw it last time. I can't remember where it was. It gave you the choice of having the person who was talking or all of them. And that might be what's got...
It just occasionally shows the person who's talking, but I can see all the images when he puts them up.
What's this one here? Call layout. What does that do?
That might be it.
Where are you
View,
looking?
speaker view. Float. Well, yes, right. To the left of where there's like a chess man with a plus sign at the next to him. Have you got that?
Yeah.
And there's like a square next to that with a down arrow.
Yeah.
Right, click on the down arrow, and what I've got clicked is grid view and float.
I'm right clicking, am I?
No, left.
Left. Oh, it's got. Hang on. Left click.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to tick in grid view and a tick in float. See if that does it.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Well done.
Yay.
Must have been on the speaker view. I knew I'd seen.
Well, John's in a square, but only. Hang on.
Yeah, I'm up the top.
You're up top left, but it's just your bubble. I can see Pete in his square.
Right.
And I can see a green background where Carl should be.
Yes.
Carl's gone green. Yeah.
I can't see Roger.
Well, I'm in that rectangle on the right corner.
Yeah.
And I can't see John, just his bubble.
Right.
Yes.
I don't know how it decides which ones to show as squares and which ones to show as bubbles.
No, but I haven't seen you, Andy, at all.
So it was Carl doing it. Carl selecting them.
Yeah, well, Tony thinks it's Carl. It's Carl that's.
I think, not to Pete, but I was late joining it, or perhaps I'm up there because of that white Pete suddenly up there. I don't know. He started down below.
Well, you and Pete were on when I came in, and Carl joined us then. No, John joined us, didn't he? And then Carl.
I mean, late, not tonight, joining the group. I only was come in.
I was the last one in.
To do with that or what? It doesn't matter as long as, you know. But I thought perhaps he's controlling it.
I thought it was Carl that was.
Selecting, but I've never been on the main square, so it doesn't matter.
Well, it depends, John. Rod, you were on the main square earlier on.
Yeah, but one region, yes, but with the group on, it's none of the
Carl's
case.
back again.
You're just a bubble now.
Yeah.
I'm just a bubble, a rectangular bubble.
No, a bubble, a round bubble.
A round bubble with
a no, it's
R-O.
rectangle with me.
Yeah,
Your
that's because it's your camera it's showing, so on your screen. But it's the same on mine on the top right. I'm a little rectangle and all the rest are bubbles.
Yes, that's it. So there we are, but
It's a mystery.
It is. It's probably just random. Or it could be picking on Pete because he's Cornish, of course.
Well, it could be. Yeah.
Keeping you in a little bubble up in the top corner. So.
yeah.
Since this COVID thing, I've had a real passion for chocolate.
Oh,
It's important to keep your energy up.
I don't know what it is, but I just love the chocolate right now.
Fortunately, there's never been a shortage of chocolate, has there? So it surprised me.
You're not pregnant, are you?
No.
I hadn't thought of that, Carl.
Another side effect of COVID-19 that they didn't tell you about.
Phantom pregnancy.
oh, oh.
Pete's been pregnant for 4 years.
He's a lovely man.
Absolutely right.
Well, Chris the driver seems to think so.
You leave me and Chris.
You know,
What?
yeah, but you always insist in being in the same room. You've got to be in the same room.
Never.
He was so upset when my son had to share their room. You know, my son was partaking to all their rituals.
Never.
Chris kind of snore in tandem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they.
Oh, you were there. You remember?
We were Drina and I were downstairs, and we could hear Pete and Chris upstairs snoring.
Oh, yeah.
And they were not even directly above our room.
Yeah, you can sleep at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe they keep each other asleep, then they kind of rock each other to sleep with their own snoring.
Yeah.
I was told I talk in my sleep. Tell all your secrets.
Ooh.
Yeah, but Chris and Peter have to put up with my son telling them all about the Second World War in his sleep.
Oh,
Right.
Didn't a bomb land in your bedroom the last time, Peter?
Well, but, yeah, Owen thought so. Yeah. Yes, he didn't have rabbit on when he was asleep. God.
it's like his father.
Right, we'll get started now. So, folks, how many of you are on Facebook?
Yes, me. No.
Yep.
Yeah, me and Peter are.
You're on Facebook. Are you dirty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why do we have an archaeology company on-side class or for you guys? Facebook.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. We could watch Peter and John be really nasty to each other. We could have a good laugh about their comments.
We love each other.
John's into still life.
I have enough trouble keeping up with my Facebook page and running the Coast Guard one, so I keep getting into trouble for not updating that quick enough.
Oh God! All right then, we'll give up that idea then. Right? Okay. I would like to tell you before we carry on that that next week we will we'll be doing a Lost King of Glamorgan. And then the final one of the series. Weirdly enough, the two on the back. The last one of the complete series will be Gwenclean, and then we look at the archaeology of the Teutoburg Forest. And then the week after that, on the 25th of May, I do believe we will be looking at. Let's have a look what that one is. I don't think we've set that one yet. So there'll be the archaeology of archaeological events like battles. So that's what we're doing next. Right. For some strange reason, Andy is on full screen, which is not a problem.
Oh. No idea why.
And not with me.
Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So everybody, if you want to cut your mics, you, John, because you're annoying me. Margaret, because she don't have to go on. Peter, Roger, I'm going to cut your mic a minute. So it's just going to be me and Pete, I think.
Right, you're going to cut it, you.
Yeah, mute. And it's me and you, Peter. Is that okay?
Yeah, all right. Yep, fine.
Right. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little bit of a screen share again. So if we can get back to where we were. Screen sharing. And hopefully we will be looking at not that.
It was handy to start with.
Right. So one of the things that we were really interested in is the skull and how the skull decayed, or not in most cases. So here we go. Bogs cure bodies in a process akin to tanning. But while they are wonderful at preserving skin, they eat away at bones, leaving the body's skeletons shrunken and sometimes completely absent. At the same time, acids in bog water destroy DNA, making genetic studies impossible. That didn't help us when we were trying to work out that when we look at the skull of Cologne Man, his skull is intact. How they found the skull at Lindow Moss of Lindow Woman intact, but they don't actually find most of the bones in the rest of the body intact. Now this is a question that we don't seem to have an answer with. So if anyone can work that out for next week, that would be great. So look at this now. Skin care secrets. So this is more about the flesh and the bones and all the rest of it. So I wanted to put this in there. Skincare secrets. Although the Cologne Man skin didn't rot away, the mummification process did change its appearance and texture. Like the Cashel Man, the Archaeology woman, and lots of other bog bodies, he's got quite a lot of tan going on. Bog bodies often sport leathery dark brown skin. Some of them also have a preserved hair that was dyed red after death. So in other words, just because they've got red hair, it doesn't mean to say it was red in life. A mistake I may have made. This is most likely caused by sphagnum, a recently discovered polymer that seeps out of dead sphagnum moss. So sphagnum and not sphagnum moss. And what seeps out is sphagnum. Leather is made through a process that strengthens the bonds between some of the natural fibers in animal hides as a tanning agent. Sphagnum has the same effect on human skin, rendering it tough and tea-coloured. Sphagnum also binds with nitrogen, which bacteria needs to survive. So by removing nitrogen, which once fueled the bacteria from the environment, the sphagnum, which comes from the sphagnum moss, helps prevent the spread of microorganisms that would normally be breaking down human and animal remains. Furthermore, sphagnum, along with the acid that it turns into, pulls calcium. This is key. Calcium right out of dead bodies. And where is the calcium found? Not in the skin, but in the bones. So in other words, the sphagnum, the liquid putrefied sphagnum moss, the byproduct of the dead sphagnum moss, the sphagnum, eats away at the bone. That's what it lives off. Bones get. We're not saying that the sphagnum is a living microorganism, but it's a living acid in a way. Bones get weakened in the process. Although sphagnum does a fine job of preserving skin, its calcium thievery isn't great for skeletons. Mummies have been found in certain bogs with soft, extra flimsy bones that are about as sturdy as cardboard and that have been distorted by heavy peat. But that's assuming the decalcification process doesn't altogether eliminate them. Lots of bog bodies have been found missing bones, and some of the mummies are totally boneless. The latter are basically human-shaped bags of leathery skin wrapped around some pickled organs. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to chuck in there before we actually talk about our wonderful Lindow Man. And what I'd like to just chuck in there like a curveball is that when we sat down, we discussed this on Monday. We had all this today, not Monday, we discussed this today. When we sat down, we thought, actually, the bone in a skull is more denser than the bone, say, in a humerus or rib bone or anywhere else. It's much more denser. So that might mean that the calcium is a lot less is less likely absorbed by the smagnon acid. That's the byproduct Magnum Moss. If anyone's actually understanding what I'm saying, I really appreciate that. So what we're saying, because skulls usually are preserved, unlike the rest of the bones, that's my only explanation. So if anyone can come up with anything next week, I will be very, very grateful. Right. So, Pete, we're going to go on a journey now without any images or any text. So what I would like to do is look at Lindow Man, a few facts, and then we're going to read a nice little article. So that's what we're going to do. So now, he's otherwise known as Pete Marsh. Not P-E-A-T, but P as Pete Marsh, so, as you, Pete, which is quite appropriate. Now, this has a rather different story than the one found a year earlier. And the story has it: the human remains of Pete Marsh, Lindow 2, were found on the 1st of August 1984 by commercial peat cutters. Lindow Man is not the only bog body to have been found in the moss. We know about Lindow Woman. We know about that one. So it's said that Lindow Man on the 1st of August 1984, I hate this when they say this, one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in the 1980s. I say that the one at St. Bees is the most significant discovery in the 1980s, but nobody really hears about it, do they? St. Bees. Everyone knows about Pete Marsh. I dare any of you not knowing about Pete Marsh before this lecture today. You all knew about him. It helped invigorate study by finding the second body, because up until when we think about it, right, the skull associated with Lindow Woman, was still part of a police investigation partially in 1984. So that's why we didn't really hear about that when we hear about the body of Lindow Man. Obviously, lots of these bodies found across Europe. Got over 1,000 of them, as we said. At the time of death, Lindow Man was a healthy man in his mid-20s, a bit like Andy, and he may have been someone of high status, as his body shows little evidence of rough or heavy work. Well, a bit like if you look at Pete, really. There has been debate over the reason for Lindow Man's death, because the nature of his demise was violent and perhaps ritualistic. It's said, after a last meal of charred bread, Lindow Man was strangled, hit on the head, and his throat cut. Dating the body has proved problematic. And why? The body was placed face down into the peat bog at a time when this type of ritualistic behavior was outlawed by the Roman state. So if we look possibly at Lindow Man, dating from about 50 AD, Lindow Woman's dating from about 250 AD. So she's after this fella. And they actually froze. They took him to the British Museum. Sometimes go to Manchester, and he was freeze dried. He was freeze dried. A bit more information will help us understand the whole picture as well. Lindow Moss itself, common land. We couldn't do much with it because it's all boggy. Once the boggy moss area covered 150 acres. So 150 acres. Whew, got that wrong. 150,000 acres. So that's 150,000. Start again. I've got that wrong. Start again. 1,500 acres. I will repeat, 1,500 acres, 1,500 football pitches in size, was once the large area of Lindow Moss. Now it's only a tenth of the size because lots of it have been reclaimed. A writer in the 1700s said it was a very dangerous landscape where many people lost their lives and drowned. By following, I will put in here Willow the Wisp. Peat has been extracted from the landscape for a very long time. When it was mechanicalized in the 1980s. So what we're saying is that Lindow Man is one of 27 bodies recovered in the area. So they've actually found a few. We know about Magnum Woman. So let's look at Magnum Man a little bit, and then we'll go on to another text, which seems to bring everything together. And it's sort of, it's a bit of an intercourse of everything that I could say about this. They found Lindow Woman about 250 meters away from Lindow Man. Andy Mould, you couldn't make this up, one of the peat cutters, on the 1st of August, who had also been involved in the discovery of the woman, took what he thought was a piece of wood off the elevator of the peat shredding machine. He decided to fling this. He flung the thing at Eddie Slack, known as Slacker to his mates. He actually threw it at him. He threw it at the Slacker's back. And when it hit the ground, peat fell off the object and revealed it was a human foot. And the police were called in and the foot was taken away for examination. So in other words, they were on a bit of a jibe, and then they found the rest of the body. And even then, when they were finding it, the body was actually decaying. So instead of allowing any more of the body to decay, they took the body to Macclesfield District General Hospital for storage, and then to be taken by archaeologists to analyse the body further. And in headlines back on the 21st of August, after the body had been taken to the British Museum, he had been known as Peat Marsh or Peat Bog, which is quite appropriate. Strangely enough, I found this strange, that the owners of the Peat Bog donated the body to the British Museum. But surely as a set of human remains, nobody could claim the human remains because they actually belong to the state and not the landowner. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go on to the other article. It's got other things about bog bodies. 106 bog bodies have been found across, England and Wales, 34 in Scotland. And let's go at this concise article, which I'd like to do. It's entitled Bodies in the Bog, the Lindow Mysteries. And I think I will share this because there's some nice illustrations. There's our Tolland Man. There's some other images, and this would be a great piece to actually share because some absolutely fab images on this one. So I'm going to share this. And Peter, let me know when we are sharing.
Yep, will do.
Are we sharing? Nope. Not. You got it?
Yes, now we got it. Yeah.
Right, this is a wonderful article. I don't think I could do anything more with this article. So other than reading it out. So this is July the 23rd, 2019. So in the 1980s, we know about this body. We're really familiar. But this is Tolland. And look at that braided rope. Tolland recovered from Danish peat bog in the 1950s. And you can see a bit of a beard there. You can see the hair. You can see the cap. And this is the image that you see. And sometimes when you do the research on this, they always mistake this as being our peat marsh, but it's obviously not. It's almost as if, in a way, I can't help thinking that person's fast asleep. Doesn't doesn't look to me if there's any pain in that person's face. But this dates from about 300 years before our ones at Lindow. At the end of the most recent ice age, we'll go with around 12,000 years ago. Melting ice formed a bog known as Lindow Moss. As the bog became to be known, it was a landscape, a mosaic of bogland, water, mossland, scrub, woodland, various habitats. And today the picturesque bog lies on the outskirts of Wimslow, a town that once offered Victorian Manchester's wealthy industrialists an escape from the city smoky haze. For the less well-off, Lindow Moss had long offered a more Spartan home. In the 1400s and the 1500s, landless poor eked out a precarious living here on society's margins, cutting and drying peat from the bog to sell as fuel for stoves and soil for crops. The industry continued well into the 1900s. As we know, operation much as it always had, workers would cut peat into blocks by hand and lay them in stacked rows to dry in the English sun, turning them repeatedly over a 2-year period before they were ready for use. An interesting fact, this would interest Pete, I'm sure, that on the islands of Orkney, it's the right of everybody to cut peat. You had a right to cut peat from common land. This was a right, and you know, when Pete went with me with a couple of the others, and we went through from Inverness all the way up to the north, we could see Pete cutting landscapes. It's a right in Scotland. Anyway, but by the 1980s, the Industrial Revolution had reached even this bucolic operation, and the whole process has been mechanized. Now peat is scooped up by mechanical digger and placed in loose stacks where it is left to dry. Afterward, it is sent to a processing mill, checked for chunks of bark and branches large enough to jam the machinery, are ground up into a fine compost, and then sold to mushroom growers around the country. And this basically is an overview of everything that we've done, really. On May the 13th, 1983, Andrew Mould and Stephen Dooley were standing by the mill's conveyor, watching for anything that might foul the operations, when they spotted a lump that reminded Mould of a small black leather soccer ball. Perhaps, they joked, this is a dinosaur egg. They pulled it off the belt and took it to Ken Harwood, manager of the peat works. Curious as to what the object might be, they washed it. But this was no ball. This was evidently gruesomely a human skull, missing its jaw, but still possessing skin, some hair, and one baleful eye that stared at them. It's interesting that somebody else has put another point of view on this article than what we've already done. The police were quick to respond to the grisly find, and in the best tradition of police work, they were quick to identify their suspect. For some time, the constabulary had believed that a local man, Peter Ranbrout, had murdered his wife. Problem was they didn't have a body. They had fruitlessly dug over Ranbrout garden just 300 yards from Lindow Moss. So when forensics reported the head was from a woman 30 to 50 years old, the police were convinced. And again, it gives more detail. Ranbrout wasn't hard to find. He only recently had only recently been jailed, released from jail, having served time for a series of sex crimes against children. Confronted with the news of discovery in the bog, he quickly confessed, it has been so long, I thought I would never be found out. And they married in 1950. Now, I won't do all this because we've done lots of it. An airline employee married Malika Ferdinand, Maria de Ferdinand, a portrait artist who loved to travel. Their romance had been notable for its brevity. Just hours from first meeting to proposal, and then only 4 days until their wedding. Their union was similarly brief, lasting just a few months. Fernandez returned to travelling using a new husband's discounted airfare, while Reinhold Braut settled into a cottage with a lover, a man. Sometime in 1960-61, Fernandez visited Reinhold Braut at his cottage and demanded money, threatening to expose his sexuality if he didn't pay. And we know it was a criminal offence until being repealed in 1967. Reinhold Braut had no money to offer her, and the two fought. Something just boiled over inside me, he stated in his confession. Later, while on trial, newspapers reported that he grabbed her shoulders and did not realise she was dead until he stopped shaking her. I was terrified and could not think clearly. The only thing that came to mind was to hide her, dismembering her body, dismembered her remains, then tried to burn them. When that failed, he scattered the remains in the bog. So we know what happened next. We know about the trial. We know about the body going, the head going to Oxford. And then this sordid tale might have slipped away as just another gruesome historical anecdote. But a year later, Andy Mould made a second morbid discovery in the peat. On August the 1st, 1984, standing again at the miller's conveyor, Mould removed a piece of what he thought was bog wood. He gave it a little clean. Then we saw the toenails. So it's rather different story than the description I've given you. That they picked it up and he chucked it at his colleague. So here we go. Again, the police were called. They shut the firm down straight away and sent loads of officers to the site. Given the recent court case and an ongoing search, they were faced with two main possibilities. Either this leg was a missing piece of Malika de Fernandez, or it belonged to someone entirely different and possibly ancient. That day, Rick Turner, county archaeologist for Cheshire, received a tip-off from a local paper find. The results of that tip would link his name to what became one of the most famous archaeological finds in British history, Lindow Man. And these remains would in turn wind up in the centre of a scientific debate over a murder mystery nearly 2,000 years in the making. The head and leg found at Lindow Moss are examples of increasingly well-known phenomena of bog bodies. To be honest with you, after the 80s, they're being found more and more in Denmark, Ireland. The ones found in Ireland in 2003, we were aware of a few in Ireland before that, and obviously in Germany, and obviously ones in North America. Some had been found hundreds of years ago. Lots have been found since. And the oldest one being 8,000 years old, and the one at Tolland, as we know, being 3,000, starting again, 2,300 years old. I could almost pass for an old man peacefully asleep with a hat still on his head, whiskers on his chin, and a leather garrote around his neck. So can we say really and truly that these are murder victims, or were they was it part of a sacrifice, or are these people finding a second death after they're dead, after they become dead? So we've done all this here. Right, we know about this. We know about the pH values between 3.3 to 4.5. We know about the oxygen not getting below that sphagnum moss layer. And we know what dissolves and what doesn't, and hair turning red. Go into this. The first recorded bog body was found in 1640 in Skalskonholzfen in Germany. Since then, hundreds of bodies have been found, 1,000 in fact. They often display signs of violence and so are presumed to be murder victims. For centuries after a body was discovered, it was most often given Christian reburial and the remains rotted away. But by the 1800s, there was greater interest taken in the scientific aspects of the phenomena, though the techniques and methods of preservation of the bodies were limited. In 1871, German scientists attempted to smoke the remains of Radiocarbon Man, much as they would do to preserve a ham. It worked. but the resultant dehydration caused the body to shrink. But they preserved it in 1871. So how good? In the early 1950s, Danish researchers were able to preserve the head, feet, and a thumb from Tollen Man by replacing the bog water in the cells with liquid paraffin and then beeswax. So, folks, when I'm critical of the really bad archaeologists from Leicester, and I keep saying that why did they do this? If they were able to preserve Tollen Man in the 1950s, 1981, it would have been easy, but they chose to destroy St. Bede's Man, and then we go to Lindow Man. So, Lindow Man discovered the day after the leg was found. The archaeologist Rick Turner, who is no longer with us, he became a senior archaeologist in Wales a few years after that, went out to the site and found a flap of skin sticking out of the peat slab. He and the police agreed the site would be excavated the following Monday, leaving him just days to assemble a team and make a plan. The spot was either the site of a murder or an archaeological site. Either way, since word of the discovery was out, police felt the body should be removed. And who better to take care of it than an archaeologist? The archaeologist Turner ultimately decided to cut a block of peat around 3 meters by 2 meters, which he hoped would encompass any other body part. He and his fellow archaeologists were immediately convinced the remains were ancient, but it took another 11 days for radiocarbon dating to confirm this was not a police matter. After the coroner released the remains, they were taken to the British Museum, where scientists, both local and international, studied them. This is an archaeological success story, I've got to say, folks. This is something that was done fairly right, other than the initial discovery. Whether the two gentlemen, Mr. Mould, threw it at his mate Slacker, I don't know, but here we go. It was eventually studied properly. What is certain is the deceased was a man in his late 20s, about my height, about 9.5 stone in weight, strong, well built, and apparently not accustomed to heavy physical work, a bit like John. His nails were manicured and his brown ginger hair and moustache neatly trimmed, and he was dumped face first into the bog. So that helped is the facial preservation. Put a mystery in front of any 5 scientists and you'll end up with a lot of arguing and a dozen theories, but probably few concrete answers. For Lindow Man, that extends to how he died. His body shows evidence of multiple injuries, including a couple of blows to his head with a V-shaped implement, possibly an axe, which appears to have driven a sliver of skull into his brain, which would have caused instant death, I may add. A hard blow across his back with something blunt broke his neck and at least one rib, which would have instantly killed him. Ligature marks on the neck where a sinew cord was found may indicate garroting, which probably killed him. So we've got definite killing and probably killing. His throat was cut from ear to ear. That would have caused definite death. So he's been killed 3 times that we know of, and a probable. And he may have been stabbed, probably killing as well. So that's 5. The argument centers on which of these happened before he died, which caused his death. What was done to his lifeless body was everything other than the one thing that actually killed him in the first place. But there may have been something else that killed him, folks. It may have been his last meal. He may have been poisoned or out of it, caused by the mistletoe that was found in his dietary, his tract. And what happened to the body over its centuries in the bog that mimic man-made injuries? So what we're saying is, could any of these things that's been done to his body have been caused naturally? And they do believe one of the injury marks on his body was actually caused by the 2 that had actually found him in the first place, Mr. Mould and Mr. Slacker. Take the ligature marks. Disagreement continues over whether the cord was used to throttle Lindow Man or to help the blood drain from his throat that was cut. So basically, it basically brings the blood out, or it stops the blood flow. You can look at it many times, or perhaps the cord was simply a necklace. Oh, that actually makes sense. And the marks occurred as his corpse bloated in the days after his death. So in other words, as his body expands, well, you can work that out. Let's not go there. What about the blows to the head? Can we just stop here a minute? So in other words, this is an archaeologist saying that he was murdered, and the next minute the archaeologist is talking himself out of it, which is my type of archaeologist. Some researchers have argued the crushing of the skull was caused by the weight of the peat bog and not an injury that caused his death. Then again, you've got CT scans and exoradiography, a form of X-ray, have shown evidence of swelling in the brain, which probably caused death anyway. This suggests Lindow Man was struck and lay unconscious for at least a few hours before he died. So he didn't suffer any pain then. Oh my God, dearie me. So perhaps we know how he died. Do we? Really? But why did Lindow Man die? Right, okay, that's another one. Atomic absorption spectroscopy, which I could never say, that's why I never say it, show the skin on Lindow Man's torso at higher degrees of copper than elsewhere on his body. And why? Basically, it's looking at the pores and seeing what the surface is and what's been absorbed into the skin, and all that type of stuff. He may have been painted with a copper pigment, suggesting some ritual element to his death. Nice. Woohoo! You'll not get this anywhere else. There's that woman again. Slap her across the face. She needs a good old slap. The idea is backed up by scanning electron microscope results. Now, this is interesting. I like this because it's quite concise, actually. Why didn't I read this out from the beginning? I wanted to go on a bit of a journey, actually. We've explored quite a number of things, actually. So here we go. The Magnum Moss, and we've looked at the smagma, the acid residue, which is caused by the rotting moss and all the rest of it, and that absorbs calcium from the bone and in all the rest of it, kills off lots of other different things. And the Magnum Moss spores in the gut, dietary tract, crushed wheat was found, bran, barley grains, and mistletoe pollen in the stomach, as well as the eggs of roundworm and whipworm. I know John's definitely interested in his whipworm and his roundworm. He's doing a scientific paper on that soon, I think. Mistletoe pollen may have been used in druidic rituals during the late Iron Age and early Roman era. I've got to remind you that if this body was laid to rest in the Roman period, they were breaking the law. If it was a ritualistic murder or a ritualistic killing, or the body had already been killed. Anyway, moving on. One common theory is that Lindow Man was triple killed. So in other words, this is a bit like hung, draw, and quartering. So you hang somebody, they're still alive. You get a knife, slit their chest open. You take all the organs out and stuff, and they're still alive. And then you would cut their body up and whatever, right? There's another process of dragging the body, but that's anyway. So this is an ancient way of triple killing, but it's likely in this case and lots of the others that the person was already dead anyway. To be honest with you, I know this sounds weird, and Carl, what am I just about to say? We can all remember people. I know people that I've known that have passed on, and I've been very angry that they've passed on. That I haven't been able to say goodbye, and you feel like hurting them in a way. How dare you die? How dare you do this? I need a way of letting my anger and vent out, right? And there's lots of ways of interpreting it in that. You might let your anger out on stabbing the individual who's dead, right? I know this sounds unbelievable, right? But in some societies, you might want to hit somebody who's already dead to it's your way of mourning. When you mourn, you're angry as well. You're angry with yourself. You're angry with them not saying goodbye. And I'm not going to say any more about that, but some of you might be able to understand what I'm trying to say. Many of the bog bodies found in Europe show a pattern of triplicate injuries. Ritualistic sacrifice. I hate the word sacrifice, and the reason why I hate the word sacrifice, and Andy knows by now, it's the way of archaeologists not understanding what they're looking at, and it's just an umbrella for everything, right? In other words, I'm letting your own minds work this out. Lindow Man's stomach contents show he was killed in late winter or early spring, hence the mistletoe, right? The ancient Celtic festival of Beltane was usually held on May the 1st. And in times of great danger, such as during the Roman invasion. I'm not sure that sentence makes sense, actually. As part of this ritual, a special bread was prepared and one piece deliberately burnt. As portions of the bread were given out, whoever received the burnt piece became the devoted one or the sacrifice. Lots, in other words. Don't know. The remains of the griddle cake found in Lindow Man's stomach with bran and char remnants might support this theory. But then again, that could have been poisoned. Whatever. Another theory of ritual sacrifice points to the fact that many bog bodies show distinguishing deformities. Lindow 3, found in Lindow Moss in 1987, has a vestigial thumb. I don't know what that is. Sorry. Somebody can enlighten us at the end on a vestigial thumb. The spine of Yeti Girl, found 1987 in the Netherlands, was curved with scoliosis. I thought the original date was 1887. Anyway, whatever. So when she was found, she had evidence of scoliosis. Although not obviously deformed, it is possible Lindow Man was chosen as some form of ritual scapegoat used to absolve collective guilt or fear. And he may have just gone, right, I want to sacrifice myself. I've had enough of life. I'm going to commit suicide anyway. Take me. Take me. We're saying that they did this in Peruvian society. Take my daughter, sacrifice her to the gods. Take me. So, we think of this and we put our own standards on this and we're horrified. But have we got any right to be horrified? We've got to think about that. Eamon Kelly, the former keeper of Irish antiquities at Dublin's National Museum of Ireland, suggested somewhat controversially that some of these bogs lie at the boundary of ancient territories and that a human sacrifice in such a location could be associated with other Iron Age practices and making sacrifices of objects at tribal boundaries, tool, weapons, cauldrons and personal ornaments and all that tosh thrown in. Was he a piece of tosh? Well, to be honest with you, I've got a little tribe, right? Let's talk about, I've got a little tribe, right? Without you guys on a Tuesday evening, I don't have a class, right? So, why am I going to sacrifice any of you? It's a stupid thing. But if we're going to give something up, right? We can give up Pete's bird's nest. We'll sacrifice that instead. After the little birds have flown away, Peter, I'm not that cruel, okay? We're going to sacrifice Pete's bird's nest, okay? So that's what we're going to do because you're all productive. So I don't really understand this offering a healthy member of society. I don't really get that, but it's just it never sits well on my stomach. Or perhaps Lindow Man was simply the unfortunate victim of a robbery. Oh, I go down in relief to find something useful for me. A victim of a robbery. Now, this is rather interesting. This is like more normal, isn't it? We know about robberies, Some of us have been victims of robberies, and we know that they can be very violent. And so a certain Robert Connolly of the University of Liverpool takes the view that certain injuries, including the neck wound and broken rib, occurred after the body was removed from the bog. Okay, we've already said that. All right. The broken neck was from the heavy blow, and the sinew cord is just a necklace. So that would have put an imprint in after you've had a heavy blow to the neck. I don't know what we're talking about here, but whether he was fighting naked or his clothes have degraded without trace is open to question. If, as is suggested by his hair, nails, and bodily habitus, he was more than a simple peasant, then perhaps his clothes were worth taking. Ah, now we understand why people are found naked, because their clothes have been nicked. Or then again, he may have been a bit like a Margaret who wanders around naked around Arnside now and again. I don't know. So the assailant or some other person or persons unknown nicked his clothes. But absence of preserved clothing does not confirm ritual. Or the other way. So actually, into the end here, that interpretation has fallen by the wayside, with more recent data showing Lindow Man being left alive for hours before between the bashing of his skull and the slitting of his throat. And really, who wanders the bogs naked while carrying enough worldly goods to warrant a mugging? Anyway, perhaps the killing was a form of punishment. In the at the time of Tacitus' writing, roughly around 100 years AD, we come in across Tacitus again. And when we do the Teutoburg Forest, we'll come across Tacitus' writings again. He's a bit of a writer, really. The coward, the shirker, and the disreputable body was drowned in miry swamps under cover of wattled hurdles. Another author, Didorius Siculus, writing maybe around a little bit before, about 50 years BC, wrote that the Gauls used human sacrifice for augury, basically, palm reading and all that type of stuff, sort of soothsaying and all those different things come under that. Sort of in his Bibliothèque Historica, Didorius Siculus said the Gauls would kill a man by a knife stab in the region above the midriff, and after his fall, they foretold the future by the convulsions of his limbs and the pouring of his blood. But we also have to view such accounts with some skepticism. The Romans were neither the first nor the last conquerors who sought to justify their invasion in terms of bringing a civilizing influence to the barbarian culture. So in other words, they were saying that the barbarians were so heinous that they did these things, but in fact, they may not have. And in fact, what was happening to Bog Bodies is something different. This last image, this is Reconstruction Man, found in 1873. This was the one that was smoked. So this is a bog body that's smoked. They obviously shrink the skin. Rather strange, that, I've got to be honest with you. The scientific and historical arguments are likely to go on. Improved technologies and new finds will continue to give us fragments of information, tantalizing glimpses of a world long past, but may never get us to the truth behind these deaths. There are missing pieces in the puzzle. There always is, and these can always be rearranged. With all these gaps, leaves us plenty of room for speculation and new theories. And one last thing I'd like to do is there's one or two facts I'd like to chuck in, then we'll call it a day. So they wanted to smoke the bodies to preserve them, so that's what they did with this body. Reconstruction Man, and then finally, as we cut the doodah, I tell you what. Wonderful Margaret, she's been really well behaved today. You haven't heard a peep out of her, you know. I think she should be given a clap after the end of this. She always interrupts and says things, you know. It's just terrible. I think somebody had a word with her, to be honest. Right. So anyway, so lastly, I'd like to mention a few other things. So just about the other couple of bodies. So we've got if I can chuck this in there quickly. Where's the other bits about the other two? So we've got below me. I can't really find it.
The vestigial thumb, while you're looking,
yeah, go for it.
Have one bone connected to the metatarsal.
I really appreciate that. I really do. And thanks for that, because I've actually found what I was looking for. You know, when I met Pete, I always knew we were destined to be together. So in other words, what we got 1983, we've got 1984. They found more in 1987. A large piece of skin was found by workmen on the 6th of February 1987. On this occasion, the police left the investigation to the archaeologists. Over 70 pieces were found constituting Lindow 3. Although the bone was not as well preserved as that of Lindow Man, the other tissue survived in better condition. Because we've got a little bit of bone at Lindow Man, which we've already mentioned. We saw that in the image. The final discovery was that of Lindow 4 on the 14th of June, 1988. Part of a left leg and buttocks were found on the elevator from a site just 15 meters west of where Lindow Man was found. Nearly 3 months later, on the 12th of September, a right thigh was discovered in the peat on the bucket of a digger. So this is believed to be part of Lindow 4. The proximity of the discovery sites, coupled with the fact that the remains were shown to come from an adult male, means that Lindow 4 is probably part, maybe, not of a separate individual, but it could actually be the parts of Lindow Man himself. So the foot, well, the foot belonged to what we've got. We've got the body, and we've got the foot of Lindow Man, and we've got the legs and stuff. So we've got all that. I'd just like to say one last thing, because I found this. And also, Peter, there is a Lindow 5. Linda 5. Get it, Pete? There's a Linda 5.
Oh, Linda, yes.
Yeah, they found a bottom jaw. Moving on. They couldn't stop her talking. Anyway, that's an in-joke. But anyway, just a couple last things, right? Here we go. Were these pit tanning? Were they actually deliberately for pit tanning? You know, there's been discussion in my other class and this one about, you know, putting the bodies in there, tan them, and they were going to go back for them or something like that. We see that at Callahallen at South Uist with those Hebridean bodies. But, you know, putting the body in the peat bog would sort of, and then bring it out and put it in the house and all that type of thing. But these are peat bodies. These are bodies put in the peat and left. So what we're saying, we're talking about putting the body in a polyethylene glycol solution, 15 to 85% water, to prevent the body being distorted. The body is then frozen solid, and the eyes are vaporized to ensure Lindow Man didn't shrink, and the body's been put on display ever since. Has been up north, back in London, up north, back in London. What I'm going to say is that any questions on anything else tonight that anyone wants to say?
It did occur to me as soon as you said one of the bodies had scoliosis, I did think, oh, I wonder if the Iron Age people, that they wanted everybody to be in good working condition, if they did get rid of the weaker members of their group.
Right, can I respond directly to that, because it's something that I forgot I was going to mention. And Margaret, you are a proper witch, because you took that out of my head then. One thing I'm going to say, Margaret, that's a really good point, because on the island of South Ronaldsley, yeah, on Orkney, they've got a place known as the Tomb of the Eagles. And every single body at the Tomb of the Eagles is actually of somebody who's deformed or disabled, right? So people were revered in having disability. We know that, I think, is it either the boneless, a Viking was thought to have some bone degenerative problem, and he was revered. Some people in the past are revered for having disability. Some people, they wanted to get rid of them. However, you know, it's the date range is quite wide, and I'm very suspicious of this word sacrifice being used. okay, if somebody was ill, now this is not being this. If somebody's ill, got say for example, if you look at North American mindsets, you got on the March of the Tears in 1892, the Seminole Indians having to go into the central reservations in the center of North America. It's the Walk of the Tears. Lots of the elderly people were just left behind to die, right? Because they were too ill. It was gonna affect the rest of the group, so they had to keep going, right? There could be a point here that if somebody's dying anyway, they've got a disease which is going to affect the rest of the population. You basically allow them to die, or you send them out of their misery. You know. So that's a good one there. That's a very good one. Can I just before we have any other questions, I know Peter's joining me on. You're joining me on Wednesday, are you, Pete?
Aye.
Okay.
Wednesday is the Archaeology and History of Wales. I know John is hopefully joining us on Saturday. And obviously we've got next week, which is the usual Skype next week. And we'll be looking at a nice, interesting area of archaeology and history from South Wales. Right, any other questions? John, Andy, Filthy Rog, or Sexy Pete?
Well, quite often people with a disability would be very, very good in a particular field. And that's why they may well have been revered in some instances. Because somebody like yourself, I mean, you have a disability, but you're pretty good at the old archaeology.
Exactly. What about you, Andy?
The bone density thing is quite interesting. So it kind of looks a bit about that while we're in the break. The male skull stays the same density throughout its lifetime, but the female one doesn't. It deteriorates. I'm guessing through that, what's it called? Lose the calcium from your bones.
Osteoarthritis.
Paralysis.
But also the skull itself, the densest bone is in the base of the skull, but it's not the whole skull, it's just the bottom part of it.
Yes.
So I don't think that would be sufficient to slow it down. I was wondering whether there are, like you were saying about using the was it the shrew's brain to react with the preserve the skin. I'm wondering whether the
preserve the bone.
Brain. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. Right. That is yes. I like.
Just slow it down a bit, perhaps.
Yeah, because there's different. Go on, Pete.
That makes sense. Sounds good. Yeah.
That. I want you to keep researching. Andy, the person who might know is Claire.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, can ask her. Yeah.
Because Claire's the one who's got several orangutans in her basement. She's the one who's actually preserved lots of these things.
Lots of bones in the basement. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, there's lots of young men preserved down there as well, which is a bit strange.
That's why we don't ask. Yeah.
I nearly became one of her conquests. John, what about you, John? No. Okay. What about you, Rog?
The thing about the dense bone, surely the pelvis is quite dense, that area around there. If it's just purely bone thickness, but as Andy said, you've got the other part of the brain consideration, so that would perhaps be the reason why the skull was left.
You're right, Rog. And actually, the thing is, when you think about it, right? When you think about archaeology, there's more skulls that you find more skulls being found. This could be completely wrong. There are more skulls that are found than actually most of the rest of the bones of the body.
Yeah.
The effect of the brain could be a contributory factor to that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So as well, don't I? So.
I like that.
Aussie.
So what I'm going to ask is, John, surely you've got one thing to say, John.
Good night.
No,
No, I haven't got any questions. Really, no.
no, don't forget that little thing that you put something into.
Did you touch on the red hair? You mentioned something about that before. I might have missed it, but
Basically, it's you would assume actually the natural color of copper is green, not red.
yeah.
Yes.
I thought it was to do with as it aged, that the carotene was what was left. So all mummies have red hair.
Or sesqui oxides, which are the iron
oxide or something.
It was
Copper
from the
metal, isn't it?
Magnum or whatever you call it.
Yeah, but all the mummies from other
copper.
places have got red hair as well. Yeah, the ones the Andes ones have. So.
Yeah, there's lots of different areas. Right, so if there's nothing needing to be said, I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have you all enjoyed today?
Yes.
Thanks,
God. Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you all when I see you. I'm going to say goodnight to.
Yeah.
Who are we going to go first? Are you going to go, Margaret? Have you enjoyed tonight, Mag?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we'll say goodnight. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll say goodnight to
Bye,
Margaret first.
Margaret.
Good night, Margaret.
See you in Aussie sometime.
Good night.
Good night, Margaret.
Bye
All
bye.
our love.
Okay, see you next week.
Right, okay then. See you, Roger.
Yeah,
Bye,
see you
Rog.
all. Ta-ra.
Bye,
Bye,
Rog.
Rog.
Ta-ra.
See you,
Ta-ra.
Rog. Bye.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And right, Andy, I need a word with you, and I need a word with Peter, and it's not about you, John, for once. John, it's been great seeing you. Are you joining us on Saturday?
All been well, yes. Yes.
Okay, good. And John, you've been on best behavior tonight. We're dead impressed, and I love the background. Next week, I want you to get a background of the Brecon Beacons landscape.
Right, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
Bye,
Night,
John.
John.
Bye.
Hi, John. Good
See you
night.
on Saturday, hopefully, John. Right. We're finding that when we do go back teaching, Andy, right? You're probably going to have to space people around the room. You're going to have one person space, one person space.
Okay, need a wider angle lens then.
Yeah, this is going to be the problem.
Yeah.
We're already seeing the impossibilities of teaching some of our classes. When new rules come in, you're not going to be able to have a situation where people are sitting alongside each other.
No, but they can sit behind each other, can't they? So you can have a narrower field, but just depth. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You get something that way. There's only 5 or 6 of us, so we should be able to manage.
I think
And
I think if you bring back in if you bring Gilbert back into the mix, then yeah, I think what we've agreed with Gilbert is that he'll contact us when he's coming back.
Yeah, we might be clearer by then anyway. So, but
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the social distancing is going to be around. I think for probably another year, at least. So.
Yeah. So we've actually put in grant applications to actually have tablets for people who don't have access to a computer.
Oh, great one! That's a really nice idea. Yeah.
And Sandra should have one as well, Pete. So it'd be you could pick up the tablet off Sandra, put the lesson on, and then drop it back off for her to watch it, Pete.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
We got somebody to do it from Lantwit, but we're just trying to operate this organisation with very little resources and also very little personnel. It's Michelle's pulling her hair out, thinking you're just doing too much. But yeah, with some of this, we can't justify doing some things for some people and doing some things for other people.
Yeah.
So, okay. On that note, if there's nothing you two want to say, then I'm off.
No, I think that's.
Oh, you've been off for years, but still.
How are
You bastard!
How are you able to, just a quick one, Carl, how are you able to record it? And it always seems you're recording it.
Actually, it's got at the top hand corner. It's got what it is when you go off this now, right?
Yeah.
When you go off this now, it will you'll see 3 other recordings in this one, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop this record. If I stop, no, I won't stop the recording. The recording stops as soon as everyone's gone.
Yeah. Okay.
I can stop it if I want.
Yeah, but I just wondered, how did you record it? How do you set it up to record it?
Right, you go to the right hand corner. You can record it as well.
Yeah.
You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the top one should be record. Have you got it?
Top right hand corner. I haven't got anything on the top right hand corner at all.
Well, what I'm going to do is going to screen share now, and hopefully, right. Are you seeing my screen?
No.
No.
Just you.
Okay. Well, shit. Right. Okay. Can you see what I'm coming up on my screen now?
Yes.
You see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got So yeah, don't seem to have that. It's strange.
So in other words, we've got Pete's got a different version than you have. I've got a different version than John. So we've got 4 different versions.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
There is a worry that because Skype is having to compete with Zoom and MSN whatever and another thing and whatever, I don't think Skype's going to be around for as long as so we may have to go over to Zoom anyway.
Yeah, it seems to be very popular and everybody is using it at the moment. I mean, everything, any group I'm involved in is, we could have a Zoom, committee meeting and all the rest of it. Why is everyone using Zoom all of a sudden? I thought, and it's either because it's Microsoft have made it, so it's what they're promoting on their corporate stuff. So all companies are using it, so that's why it's suddenly got popular. But whether it's any better or not in the long run, I don't know. I mean, you say it is, don't you? And Karen's been using it. She says it's much better to use as well.
But the difference is we actually own the package. It's different for.
I think that's the secret, that it's only better because you're actually paying for the use of it. The free version doesn't seem to be a lot different to Skype. So
it's not a lot different to Skype. This is why I was thinking: there was a pay option for Skype at one time, but we didn't take it out.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's available anymore now. So. Anyway, that's great.
Anyway, I got a dash. I'll see you tomorrow, Pete, and I'll see you next week, Andy.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Thank you. Good night, Pete.
Take care.
Thanks, Carl.
See you, Pete.
Love to Sandra. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I love to Sandra as well. Take care, Pete.
Yeah.
See you, Andy. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.